A compromised machine rarely looks dramatic from the outside. No flashing warning lights, no obvious malfunction. Just normal network traffic quietly doing something it was never meant to do. That's the uncomfortable truth. Most modern malware doesn't act alone. It listens, it waits, and it receives instructions like a disciplined agent in a covert operation. And the real danger isn't just infection, it's communication. Welcome to BlueHat Cybersec Academy. Once malware is inside a system, its effectiveness depends on one thing: whether it can reliably stay in touch with its operator without being noticed. That invisible lifeline is called the command and control, or C2 channel, and it is the nervous system of nearly every serious cyber attack. This is what we're breaking down today: how these channels actually work, why they are so difficult to detect, and what gives defenders a real fighting chance. Now stick with me, because once you understand C2, you stop seeing malware as just code and start seeing it as a communication system. Let's start with the core idea. Malware is rarely autonomous. A common misconception is that malware is fully self-sufficient, like a virus that simply spreads and destroys. But in reality, most modern threats behave more like remote-controlled tools. Attackers rely on C2 channels to send commands such as exfiltrate files, keylog this user, or move laterally. They use it to receive stolen data, push updates to malware capabilities, and even maintain persistence while adapting behavior in real time. So without C2, malware becomes significantly less dangerous. But with it, even a simple infection can evolve into long-term espionage or ransomware operations. And that leads to the real question: not just, how did malware get in? But something more important: how is it still talking to its operator? That question alone changes how you think about cybersecurity. Now let's break down the anatomy of a C2 channel. At a technical level, every C2 system has three essential parts working together. First, you have the infected host, the compromised machine sitting inside the target network. Second, there's the C2 server, the attacker's infrastructure that issues commands. And third, the communication pathway, the actual channel that connects them. And here's the key insight: that communication pathway is where most of the cat-and-mouse game actually happens. Defenders rarely see the server itself. What they actually see is the traffic pattern, the language of the malware trying to stay connected. Now let's move into the most common ways attackers actually build these communication channels, because they don't rely on just one method. They adapt constantly to blend into normal network behavior. One of the most common is HTTP, or HTTPS-based C2, often considered the camouflage favorite. In this method, malware hides its traffic inside normal web requests. That includes regular-looking HTTPS connections, fake API calls, and even traffic routed through compromised or cloud-hosted domains. And why does this work so well? Because HTTPS encrypts content, which makes inspection harder. Because web traffic exists everywhere, all the time. And because it blends so easily into legitimate user behavior. The result is almost unsettling: malicious commands disguised as innocent browsing activity. And the key idea here is simple but powerful: nothing looks malicious on its own. Next comes DNS-based C2, often described as the stealthy signal channel. Instead of using web traffic, malware abuses the domain name system. It encodes data inside DNS queries that look something like random strings, followed by attacker-controlled domains. Each query can carry small pieces of data, or simply act as a check-in signal. So why do attackers love this? Because DNS is lightly monitored in many environments. Because it is essential for the internet to function, meaning you can't simply block it without breaking systems. And because at scale, it is extremely difficult to distinguish malicious queries from legitimate ones. The trade-off is bandwidth. It's very low, but for simple instructions, it is more than enough. Think of it like whispering through infrastructure that everyone is forced to use. Then there's peer-to-peer, or P2P C2, where the model completely changes. Instead of a central server controlling everything, infected machines communicate with each other directly. This gives attackers major advantages. There is no single point of failure. It becomes much harder to dismantle the entire botnet infrastructure, and it's highly resilient against takedowns. This approach is often used in large botnets where survival matters more than speed. In simple terms, it's decentralization, but designed for malicious control systems. Now we move into something even more interesting: attackers using legitimate platforms as communication channels. This includes paste sites, social media comments, GitHub repositories, and messaging APIs. And the reason this works is surprisingly straightforward. Traffic goes to trusted domains. Organizations rarely block these services because they are essential for business, and commands can be hidden in plain sight, encoded, embedded, or disguised as normal content. This blurs the line completely between legitimate user activity and malicious control traffic, and that's what makes it dangerous. It doesn't look like hacking traffic. It looks like everyday internet behavior. There's also a more experimental layer: covert channels. In these cases, attackers embed communication into unexpected parts of the system. That might include timing patterns in network packets, hidden data inside audio signals or metadata fields, or even steganography inside images downloaded from the internet. These techniques are less common, but they prove a critical point. If data can move in any form, it can be turned into a communication channel. At this level, it stops being just networking and becomes creative engineering under constraint. Now, the obvious question is, why is detecting all of this so hard? At first glance, the solution seems simple: just block suspicious traffic. But modern C2 systems are designed specifically to avoid anything that looks suspicious. There are three major reasons for this difficulty. First, encryption hides content. Even if traffic is inspected, HTTPS prevents visibility into payloads unless deep inspection techniques are used. Second, legitimate services are abused. Blocking cloud platforms or social media is often operationally impossible in real environments. Third, behavior looks normal in isolation. A single DNS request or HTTPS connection rarely looks malicious on its own. The real signal is in patterns over time, not individual events. So in reality, C2 detection is not about spotting bad packets. It's about recognizing bad behavior over time. So what do defenders actually look for in practice? Instead of trying to read encrypted content, they focus on behavioral signals. They look for repeated periodic connections, often called beaconing. They look for unusual domain patterns or newly registered domains. They track rare or abnormal DNS queries. They analyze traffic volumes that don't match normal user activity. And they flag connections that have no legitimate business justification. Machine learning and anomaly detection are often used to assist here. But even without AI, the logic is simple. Healthy systems communicate in messy, human, inconsistent ways. Malware communication is often too structured, too consistent, or just slightly unnatural in timing or behavior, and that inconsistency becomes the first real clue. Now here's one of the most important strategic insights in cybersecurity. You don't always need to remove malware to neutralize it. If you break its communication channel, several things happen immediately. It cannot receive new instructions, it cannot exfiltrate data, and it becomes static, far less dangerous than before. That's why defenders invest heavily in network segmentation, DNS filtering and monitoring, strict egress traffic controls, and threat intelligence feeds for known malicious domains. In many real-world incidents, cutting communication is what collapses the entire attack chain. And when you zoom out, the bigger picture becomes clear. Command and control is not just a technical mechanism. It represents the evolution of modern cyber threats. Attackers no longer rely on one-time infections. Instead, they build ongoing relationships with compromised systems, adapting in real time, shifting tactics, and quietly extracting value over weeks or even months. So cybersecurity shifts as well. From a simple prevent infection mindset to something more advanced, detecting and disrupting communication. Because once you understand how malware talks, you realize something important. Most breaches are not silent explosions, they are conversations. That went unnoticed for too long. Now, before we wrap up, here's your challenge. If you really understood this, try answering these in the comments. Why do you think HTTPS-based C2 is harder to detect than traditional malware traffic? What makes DNS a useful but limited communication channel for attackers? Which C2 model completely removes the idea of a central control server? And finally, if you were a defender, would you focus more on payload content or traffic behavior? And why? Write your answers below and let's see how you break it down. And if you're following the Malware Encyclopedia series here at BlueHat Cybersec Academy, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, because next time we go even deeper into how attackers stay hidden inside networks and how defenders actually start pulling them out in the real world.